In this session, I'll talk about ArchiMate language structure and its use for TOGAF framework. To briefly, a brief description, if we wish, about the subject is that an architecture is typically developed because key people have concerns that needs to be addressed by the business and IT systems within an organization, such that people are commonly referred to as stakeholders in the system. The role of the architecture is to address these concerns by designing architectural descriptions of solutions that offer different views for different stakeholders. To provide a uniform representation for diagrams that describes enterprise architecture, the ArchiMate enterprise architecture modeling language has been developed. ArchiMate is a lightweight and scalable language in several aspects. To be exact, its architectural framework is simple but comprehensive enough to provide a good structuring mechanism for architecture domains, layers, and aspects. It also incorporates the concepts of the service orientation paradigm that promotes a new organization or new organizing principle in terms of business, application, and infrastructure services for organization, with far-reaching consequences for their enterprise architecture. The language structure is illustrated here in this diagram in a pyramid. We can see the ambiguous specification and description of enterprise architecture concepts and especially of their relationships requires an architecture modeling language that addresses the issue of consistent alignment and facilitates a coherent modeling of enterprise architecture. Therefore, they come up with this design approach. A key challenge in the development of a general meta model for enterprise architecture is to strike a balance between the specification of language for individual architectural domains and a very general set of architectural concepts which reflects a view of system as a mere set of interrelated entities. As you can see in here, concepts can be described at different levels of specifications within the pyramid, as we can see. At the base of the triangle, we find the meta models of the architecture modeling concept used by specific organizations, as well as a variety of existing modeling languages and standards. UML is one of the examples of this kind of languages in this category. At the top of the triangle, we find the most general meta model for system architecture, essentially a meta model that merely comprises notions such as entity and relations. The design of the ArchiMate language started from a set of relatively general or relatively generic concepts higher up in the pyramid, as we can see. These have been specified towards the application at different structural layers as explained in following sections. Now let's have a look at the core concepts of the language. The core language consists of three main types of elements: active structure elements, behavior elements, and passive structure elements that we sometimes call objects. The active structure elements are the business actors, application components, and devices that display actual behavior. For example, subjects of activity and so on. Then there is the behavioral or dynamic aspect. The active structure concepts are assigned to behavioral concepts to show who or what performs the behavior. The passive structure elements are the objects on which behavior is performed. In the domain of information intensive organizations, which is the main focus of this language, passive structure elements are usually information or data objects, but they may also be used to represent physical objects as well. We make a distinction between an external view and an internal view on systems when looking at the behavioral aspects. These views reflect the principles of service orientation. The service is the externally visible behavior of a providing system. From the perspective of a system that uses that service, the environment consists of everything outside this providing system. The value provides the motivation for the service existence. An interface providing an external view on the service provider and hides its external structure and behavior. As you can see, all these concepts relationship in this diagram is more visual, and we can see all the descriptions that I just talked about visually in this diagram. Another aspect of the language is the collaboration and interaction. Going on level deeper into the structure of the language, we distinguish between behavior that is performed by a single structure element, such as actor or role component, or collective behavior like interactions, that it happens between number of actors, that is performed by collaboration of multiple structure elements. Relationships, next to the core concepts outlined before, ArchiMate contains a core set of relationships. Several of those relationships have been depicted here. We can see them there for corresponding relationship concepts that occur in existing standards. For example, relationships such as composition, aggregation, association, and specializations are adopted from UML2, while triggering is used in many business process modeling languages. There is also something called layering. What we do here is that we basically want to develop the enterprise architecture in different layers, and those layers are basically business layers, application layers, and technology layers. And this language allows us to develop certain models or certain diagrams for every one of these layers, and then gives us the relationship capability to actually connect these different layers together. That's something that other languages and in previous generations weren't capable of. In line with service orientation, the most important relationship between layers is formed by used by relationships, which shows how the higher layer makes use of the services of lower layers. The services need, we need to also mention that the services need not only be used by elements in the higher layer, but also can be used by elements in the same layer as well, of course. A second type of link is formed by realization relationships. Elements in lower layers may realize comparable elements in higher layers. For example, data objects in application layer may realize a business object in a business layer, or an artifact in technology layer. Okay. So framework basically gives us the dimensions of the it gives us basically two-dimensional array of capability of modeling, as well as process aspects of development. As we can see here, layers are the three levels at which an enterprise can be modeled: a business, application, and technology. The business layer offers products and services to external customers, which are realized in the organization by business processes. The application layer supports the business layer with application services that are realized by software or software applications. The technology layer offers infrastructure services, for example, processing, storage, and communication services needed to support the applications realized by the computer and communication hardware and firmware in the system. In terms of aspects at the bottom, the active structure aspect represents the structural concepts, for example, a business actor or application component, and devices that display actual behavior like subjects and activities. The behavior aspects represents the behavior such as processes, functions, events, and services that are performed by the actor. Behavioral concepts are assigned to structural concepts to show who or what displays the behavior. The passive structure aspects represent the objects on which behavior is performed. These are usually information objects in the business layer and data objects in the application layer, but they may also be used to represent physical objects as well. Motivation. The core concepts of ArchiMate focuses on describing the architecture of system that supports the enterprise. And not covered are the elements which in different ways motivate the design and operation of the enterprise. So these motivational aspects correspond to the why column, if you remember our discussion in Zachman framework. So the motivation is the why column in that framework, which was internally left out of scope in the design of ArchiMate 1, but we are using it in our ArchiMate 2, which is this version. The main reason to introduce a motivational concept in ArchiMate is to support requirements management and to support the preliminary phase and the phase A, which we will be discussing in future sessions when we are talking about the architecture vision of the TOGAF ADM framework, which establishes the high-level business goals, architecture principles, and initial business requirements. When we get to implementation and migration, this extension includes concepts for modeling implementation program and project to support program portfolio and project management, and a plateau concept to support migration planning. The proposed extension aims at covering the main concept of a program and project management standards and best practices such as MSP, Prince2, and so on, and other project management frameworks. Concepts that are specific to one of these models are not part of the extension, but may be defined as specialization of the generic concepts. In this way, the set of concepts and relationships that are defined in the extension is kept at the minimum. And finally, the relationship between ArchiMate and TOGAF is basically ArchiMate is a tool that is used to implement or actualize the ADM development tool of TOGAF framework. The ArchiMate language, as described in this session, complements TOGAF in that it provides a vendor-independent set of concepts, including a graphical representation that helps to create a consistent integrated model below the waterline, which can be depicted in the form of TOGAF views. The structure of the core ArchiMate language closely corresponds with the three main architectures as addressed in the TOGAF ADM. This is illustrated in this figure image. This corresponding would suggest a fairly easy mapping between TOGAF views and the ArchiMate viewpoints. As you can see, the business layer in ArchiMate, when we develop this directly corresponds to business architecture in ADM of TOGAF framework. Similarly, application corresponds to information systems architecture, and the technology corresponds to the technology architecture.